Welcome back, Camden Catholic. Just kind of sitting here enjoying my Catholic Schools Week ice cream. Um, we're going to pick up today on where we left off in class talking about Charles V, the Habsburgs, and the Absolutists of Spain. Right now, anyway, so in class we talked about how the power vacuum was created due to the Reformation. And we started discussing about how this just left room for very large, powerful leaders to come into play. Now, the main thing about it is that most of history wants to paint these people as completely negative, but it's just mainly more along the lines of it demonstrates to you that the absolutist theories can usually, sometimes kings and rulers will get it out of hand. They'll start taking advantage of their citizens, and that usually leads to a revolution, which is where we're heading to in this point. Now, here's the thing, though. We got to talk about some of the best examples of absolutists. Now, the main guys we got to talk about today is Philip II. Now, Philip II of Spain, which is this guy, Charles V's son. So, anyway, like we talked about in class, though, Charles V passed laws through the Edict of Nantes, Nantes, to make it so German princes could pick the religion of their province in this area right here. And this is mainly due to the religious wars, like the 30 Years' War caused by the Reformation. So, let's keep going. But Charles V and the Habsburgs controlled this in Spain, northern Italy, all of the Holy Roman Empire, and even parts of the Netherlands, right? But let's keep going. So Charles V, though, because his empire was so large, and this is not including all the colonies he had in North and South America, because his empire was so big, he couldn't handle the pressure, right? Couldn't handle the pressure, and he split the family into the Austrian branch and the Spanish branch, right? So he retired to a monastery and then passed rule on to his son, Philip II. And he gave the Holy Roman Empire to his brother, Ferdinand. So now Philip II has a smaller area that he gets to control, and he's making a ton of money right now off of the colonies in North America and South America, mainly from the millions of pounds of gold bullion and silver that are coming in from the mines. Now, fun facts about the Habsburgs, though. They may have split the family into two parts, but then there was a lot of incest among the Habsburgs, and they started intermarrying, which led to a lot of genetic defects later on. And we'll talk about the Romanovs from Russia and Alexei, their hemophiliac son, and a lot of other stuff like that. And his dad's name was actually Philip the Handsome, even though he was not that good looking of a guy. So, anyway, let's keep going. So, Philip II is now the absolute ruler of Spain. He believes himself to be an absolutist, and one of his big things was he was very shy, very recluse, but he's a fierce Catholic. He actually successfully purged 90% of all the non-Catholics out of Spain. So, he took over Portugal after the King of Portugal died because his aunt was the queen. So technically, by birthright, he actually got to take over Portugal as well. And with Portugal came their trading empire in Asia. So, this helped Spain become the richest country and him as the richest ruler in the world. Now, as we know, money can very often corrupt politicians. So, that's what's going to lead to. Anyway, he's going to end up marrying Bloody Mary, Mary Tudor of England. And it was actually kind of a weird marriage because she was 10 years older than him. She was late into her 30s, which by this time is a very, very older person, right? Life expectancy around this time was only about 45. Now, she's going to die, though, from a loveless marriage because he was cheating on her the whole time, even though she was all about him and thought he was awesome. She's going to die, and he loses the role of England to Elizabeth I. So write this down somewhere. Mary handed off, after she died, rule passed to Elizabeth, okay? Elizabeth is her sister. Now, here's the big tricky thing. When we talked about the Reformation, we talked about how Elizabeth, unlike Mary was a fierce Catholic, but Elizabeth was born of the Protestant relationship between Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, right? So, Henry VIII established the Protestant Church of England, the Anglican Church, and then Elizabeth was born of that marriage. So Elizabeth is a Protestant. She's not a Catholic. And remember, Philip is a fierce Catholic. So these two hated each other, right? And he hated Elizabeth. Fun fact, he actually asked Elizabeth to marry him, and she said no. Now, and that's his own that's his dead wife's sister. But he wanted to marry her because back in the day, royal marriages were not necessarily for love. They were for diplomatic affairs, to create alliances between countries, because that was better than a document. A relationship was sealed, right? Anyway, let's keep going, though. So Philip's going to try and invade England to defeat Elizabeth I. And that's going to lead to this huge event called the Spanish Armada, right? The Spanish sent 136 ships against England's 32 ships. However, England had a bunch of tiny little merchant vessels as well. So English were greatly outnumbered by the Spanish, but England's going to win by using things called fire ships and a little bit of luck too. So this right here is called the Armada portrait of Elizabeth, right? Now, they got really lucky because when they tried to go around England, the Spanish went through the English Channel, tried to go all the way around England to find a place to invade England. Now remember, Philip's a Catholic, so he was expecting that when he got to England, the English Catholics would side with him to help take over England and depose Elizabeth. So, now Elizabeth I gave a crazy awesome speech called the Tilbury speech, and it galvanized the English to fight off the Spanish. So what happened at one of these major battles, though, is she had developed these things along with her pirate associates, because she employed a lot of pirates, Sir Francis Drake being one of them. They used these things called fire ships. And fire ships were literally boats that had been set on fire with the express reason of being shoved at another boat to catch that one on fire. Sometimes loaded with explosives, sometimes loaded with armor and things like that. And also, the Spanish lost because constantly they kept wanting to try and board the English ships instead of firing at them using the cannons. Now, keep in mind, too, the Spanish galleons were big boats, and the English vessels were very small, but they were very, very maneuverable. So, the English are going to be greatly outnumbered, but defeat the Spanish because they had home field advantage, right? And then also, the luck part of it has to do with the fact that when Spain was trying to go all the way around Ireland to come and try and invade from the backside, they got hit by several storms that sank a bunch of their boats. So, this was huge, though, because Elizabeth, a Protestant leader, defeated Philip, a Catholic one, right? So this was a big showing of the solidifying the Reformation in a lot of people's minds. Now, Spanish power is going to decline after the loss of England. However, it was going to be a golden age of art and literature. Now, remember, the Renaissance, some people say, never really happened because art and literature leaps are actually, they always come from countries with great economies, right? When an economy is doing well, great art comes out of it. So, there was a really good economy under Philip II because of the colonies of North and South America. Now, two of the very famous artists to come out of this period are El Greco, and Velázquez, right? Greco is right here. He does a lot of religious scenes, especially the Annunciation. And then right here, this is one of Velázquez's paintings. It's his most famous one. So, and then also Cervantes wrote a very famous book known as the very first European novel. It's called Don Quixote, right? So, really quick, this is an El Greco painting. This is the Annunciation. It's his most famous painting. All right, now, and then he uses a lot of dark colors to exemplify the religious themes of each painting. And then here you go. This is a Velázquez painting. He paints a lot of people that are distorted. And this is one of his most famous paintings as well. He uses a lot of shadows in the back and mirrors and reflective objects and false lighting to try and bring focus to certain people in the foreground. I'll tell you a lot of really fun facts about this painting tomorrow. Don't let me forget, okay? And then right here, this is a little picture from Don Quixote. Don Quixote is actually kind of making fun of the Middle Ages, and it was a novel that was showing that the ideas of the Middle Ages were slowly dying because Don Quixote is a knight. He's a knight from the feudal system, and he has all these books, right? And he was reading these books, and someone made fun of him, saying that chivalry was stupid. So he puts on his old armor. He's an old man. He's like very, very old. Puts on his armor, and he rides his old horse, and then like he goes on this journey throughout Spain, and at one point he thinks a windmill is a giant, so he charges it with a lance. So, but Don Quixote is considered one of the very famous novels of Europe in European history. So, but anyway, Spain is going to weaken even further, though, due to the Dutch, inflation, and stuff was a little too pricey. Now, inflation is because their money lost a screaming amount of value. Now, remember, what two minerals were the Spanish bringing in from North America and South America? Good job. I heard y'all. Yeah, they were bringing in a lot of silver and gold, particularly silver, though. So bringing in so much silver is going to put a lot of it on the market, and it's going to lose its value. So their money got greatly inflated. It wasn't worth as much. And also, since they had purged out a lot of Jews and Muslims during the Inquisition under Isabella Ferdinand and Philip II, there were no craftsmen left around to make very quality goods. So a lot of Spanish people started buying goods from other countries, causing the Spanish market to decline, right? Then Dutch are going to revolt against the Spain, and with the help of England, causing massive Spanish debt. So, Philip II considered himself an absolutist, and you notice this by a couple of things. He immediately wanted to fight a woman that didn't want to marry him simply because she was a Protestant. Now that's really, really bad from a government perspective. The government is meant to be unbiased, right? The government is not supposed to attack people just because they're a different religion than you are. So he's a very good example of an absolutist ruler. He's also a good example of an absolutist ruler because it shows how the economy flourished under him, but then greatly declined when he didn't take care of certain economic issues. Now, we're going to talk about other absolutists later on. We're going to talk about a particular absolutist tomorrow when he tried to take over a country that was never supposed to be absolutist. So, we'll get back to this tomorrow. We will review all this stuff. Make sure you get all this down. Make sure you were listening. And I'll talk to y'all tomorrow, Camden Catholic. Have a good evening.